Hi, everyone, and welcome to the MLOps podcast. I am Dean, your host, and today I have with me Noa Weiss. Noa is an expert in AI and machine learning. She's a consultant working with companies to define and solve hard data problems. She is also on the advisory board of the Modern Agriculture Foundation and on the mentor team for the Good Food Institute, where she applies her knowledge in the sort of alternative protein industry. She leads the Israeli community of women in data science and also participates in pro bono machine learning research, working on deep learning for whale sounds, which I find very cool. She has over 12 years of experience both in the industry and in academia. And she was previously a data scientist at Armis, working on machine learning in the fields of Internet of Things and Internet of Things security. And before that, she was a data scientist at Secure Touch and PayPal, working on risk and fraud detection. And I think she's a prominent voice in thinking about and working through data science problems from first principles. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. So, Noa, thank you for making time. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to start sort of from the middle of that intro. And when I did some background research about you, the whale thing surprised me. So how do you get into deep learning research around whale sounds? That sounds really cool.
It is really cool, and I have a rather unexpected answer, I think. I got into it through swing dancing.
Okay.
Not what you
Tell me
thought
the
I'm going to
story.
say, is it?
No.
So I'm an avid swing dancer. It's a big hobby of mine, and through the swing dancing community, I got to know someone from the foundation. They were just before their second expedition, and he told me all about it. The expeditions is every year we go. Well, most years we go on an expedition to find and record humpback whales to use the data for our models. And so this friend told me all about it. And then a few months later, when I had some free time, I rang him up and I said, "Okay, I'm in."
That's amazing. And so, can you explain a bit about how you apply deep learning there? Like, what does the machine learning aspect of that look like?
Yeah, of course. So basically, what we do is we work with marine biologists, researchers. I should also mention that we don't only work with whales anymore. It
Hmm.
started focusing on whales. Whales are still our main focus, but
Mhm.
today we work with marine mammals in general, manatees, dolphins, and we work with biologists, researchers in the field, and we help them use their data because same as with a lot of different domains, the tool of human tagging is very, very expensive. And
Mhm.
sometimes those researchers have just vast amounts of recordings, of audio recordings, that they would like to get more information from, but having themselves or students going over hours of recording and tagging everything is a lot of work. So we help them do that with the use of machine learning.
That sounds really really amazing. I think that answer is sort of a good segue into the fact that machine learning is everywhere today, and it's true for whale and dolphin and manatee research, but it's true as well for companies in the industry. And many, if not all of them, want to incorporate machine learning into their organization, into their product. And this is, of course, on a spectrum from companies saying, "I have data, and I heard that data is a useful thing, so I want to do something with that data." And all the way to companies where the company was founded and exists solely for the purpose of building a machine learning product. The best example of this are autonomous driving companies and things like that, but not just them. And so my first question about this topic is sort of, what do you think most people get wrong when they think about starting out a new machine learning project?
Okay, so I have an answer that is kind of provocative, and I just might get kicked out of some machine learning groups after this podcast airs. But I think that the main thing people get wrong is thinking about those projects as machine learning projects.
Mm.
I think that the right way to go about it is to be really focused on what the current immediate problem that you're trying to fix is, to solve is. And then maybe you should use machine learning, but maybe you shouldn't. A lot of times people go straight, like head on towards the machine learning. And obviously I get it. I love machine learning. I wouldn't be focusing on professional life on it if I hadn't. But it's not always the best solution, especially if you're a startup. I have a talk called the Quick and Dirty AI Startup, where I talk about startups that have AI as a main component of the products. And especially when you're a young startup, you want to be really, really lean and really conservative with your resources. You don't want to spend a lot of time on something that you might not need. Like every day counts. And I see startups that, despite that fact, they spend a lot of time and effort on creating machine learning models where simpler solutions could suffice. For example, going for a rule-based algorithm, something that's like a nested if-thens. Like people really, like they get really bad rep, but it could be really useful, especially if you have domain knowledge that you could use. And for most startups, that could get you through those first stages. It depends, of course. Sometimes autonomous cars, obviously, you need to have like proper machine, like you need to go full scientific there. You can't just do the quick and dirty solution. But for a lot of problems, quick and dirty will get you there. Even if you are gonna go and build a machine learning model, there are ways to make it more cost effective, like more efficient. For example, so deep learning is all the rage, right? It's been the case for a few years now. Everybody talks about it. Everything that's cool needs to be deep learning. But for a lot of problems, especially if we're talking outside the field of computer vision or audio processing, classical machine learning will give you a much better solution when you need to train your own model. Or, for example, if we're talking about natural language processing, then using existing public models, foundation models, those big ones that, huge companies like Google already trained and released, and you can use them now. So there are a lot of solutions that are maybe not as sexy, maybe using a human in the loop, where you have a person actually reviewing all or some of the results of the model before it goes towards the user at the end, or whatever way you incorporate your model. So they're not as cool. It's not something that you'll boast about in your next conference, but it gets the job done, and it does it much faster, which can really be a game changer for a young startup, and honestly also a larger company.
Yeah, I think that the thing about so first there's that joke that before deep learning was all the rage, the real machine learning was done in ifs and elses. So I don't know if that was exactly true, but there's definitely something to that. I also think that even when you look at the cutting edge stuff, I don't know if this is something that's like really wide public knowledge, but if we go to the most cutting edge of cutting edge models right now, which is probably ChatGPT, right, versus GPT-3. Like I was using GPT-3, like the API from a very early stage when they released it, and then obviously ChatGPT when it came out. The main realization there is that the difference between them is not the underlying model, but the fact that the original GPT was wrapped in basically a prompt engineering wrapper that makes it respond in the way that ChatGPT does, which is more accessible to humans. So that experience is sort
Exactly.
of the similar approach. That's not just train. I mean, we all know OpenAI is training bigger and better models, but that doesn't preclude the need to actually think about this problem as a human-oriented problem where you're trying to deliver business value. And if you train the smartest model on the block, but no one can use it, then it doesn't matter that it has the most parameters, whatever. So I think this applies, if it applies to OpenAI and ChatGPT, then it definitely applies to the people that are doing simpler problems, which are maybe even more valuable from a business perspective, but let's say simpler technologically. And the other point I'll make, and this might be an interesting way to transition to talk about this sort of as an end-to-end process. But even if you do this as a first step, right, and the later plan is to train a machine learning model, that if-else model, if we call it that, becomes sort of a baseline. Like if we can't outperform that if-else, then the cool machine deep learning model that we built maybe shouldn't go into production. And so it's a low effort way to get some connection to reality to see what a naive solution would give us. And sometimes that's good enough. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think any data science, machine learning project should start with a naive solution. You go like as naive as possible. This should be your baseline. And then everything else that you build, I mean, it's just as part of the project. I'm not even saying like build this naive solution and then put it in production. Even just as part of my research project, I want to know what to compare to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a very important part, and it's not over like it's often overlooked.
So I guess before we talk about the entire sort of process, sort of from starting out to, I don't know, when you're in the machine learning heaven, um, how do I know which category I belong to? Like if we spoke about the one extreme case being an if else will solve all my problems, and the other case being I'm actually an autonomous driving company and I have to start from deep learning. Obviously, those are the easy cases. But how do I know towards which side I'm leaning as a company?
Yeah, so there are a few rules of thumb that I can give here. Though obviously, like none of them is perfect. You have to really consider all of the circumstances. One thing you could think about is how much domain knowledge that is relevant to your product and what you're trying to solve exists, and how useful it is. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of it, then maybe an if then a rule based engine could really be enough for you right now. I worked in cybersecurity and fraud detection for some time of my career, and that is an example where domain knowledge really goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
You really know how, like, where you should look and what features you should build, and you can do a lot without even like before even putting the model into the problem. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing. Another question is, do you have data, and how much of it do you have? And is it good data? Does it have all of the details you might need? Is it labeled? Those are, I mean, if you don't have enough data, or if the data you have isn't good quality enough, then you're not going to be able to build a machine learning model anyway. So it really depends on the circumstances, because sometimes even if you don't have a lot of data, you can use existing models like foundation models, or maybe you can buy the data or use synthetic data, but it does make it a much harder problem. So it's definitely a downside for machine learning in that case.
Mm-hmm.
I would also consider whether the domain is rapidly changing. That is also a for machine learning. Okay, so another factor, which is an important one, I think, is time constraints. So when I think about like the whole process, I don't think about just what I want my end product to be, but what is the goal right now? Maybe right now, all you need as a founder, is to have a demo for potential investors, for example, and maybe you need that demo to be done in 3 weeks. And in that case, for example, I would definitely try to avoid a model, since there's a lot of uncertainty in those cases. So there are a lot of considerations to take into account.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I tend to agree, and I think that also the healthy mentality here is you start from something small that's provable and then adjust from that. So you talked about a baseline earlier,
Absolutely.
but that last point about time frame is really important, because if you if you take 3 weeks to build out a machine learning model, even if that's the right thing to do, but you end up like not being able to show anything because you spent all that time learning about how to apply sort of machine learning to your data problem, then you're not going to get more time to work on it. And so getting a result fast is with a simpler if else model sometimes is a high priority, just so that you can get sort of the credit you need to work on that more complicated one.
Yep.
But I guess like the talking about this or bringing this to the process level, how do you think about the process of developing machine learning models? And from our experience, like you can roughly divide the world into two. The projects that are like for fun, you do them usually in a notebook. It's cool to show, but no one is ever going to use them. And the ones that are going to actually have a real world impact. So if we're focusing on that type, how does the process for developing those models look like?
So the impact ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I would say that my agenda is to get people more into the mindset of really focusing on their goal, and not just the end goal, but the goal right now. So really realize what you need right now and build for it. It also means for a lot of data scientists to be more like in better contact with the like whoever is going to use that model. So maybe it means being more in contact with the product managers and maybe the users themselves, because a lot of times, so data scientists, we're very detail oriented people, and we're very much into focusing and like zooming in on our problem and doing the most research and going to like the most interesting places, like science wise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always what the product needs. And again, if it's just for fun, then like what the heck, I can play around with it as much as I want. But if I am working for a company and I want to get like to actually have an impact, then I would say be in constant contact with those people that can give you the indications of what exactly needs to be done, and always have in the back of your mind, is what I'm doing the most efficient way to get there. I want to say the quickest, but it's not always about being the quickest. You don't only want to, like, especially if you're not an early stage startup anymore, you want to build things that are going to last. And then
Sure.
they're going to be good. But maybe for that, you don't need to go for like that extra sciencey solution, and you can focus on stuff that is more, and I'm gonna say a word that data scientists don't like to hear, the low-hanging fruit. Or just in general, like keep in mind the different options to get where you need to go.
Fair enough. I don't know. I love the low-hanging fruit terminology. We use it a lot at DAXUP, so I could totally
Okay.
totally relate to that. So I guess like extrapolating from what you're saying, I tend to agree that one of the challenges is sort of disconnecting the work that you're doing from sort of the consumer, the user, from the product that you're building this into. What are other sort of, let's say, unspoken challenges that occur in this development process?
So I think that what I see as a consultant working with different companies, and also as part of my work in the community in Women in Data Science Israel,
Mm-hmm.
what I keep hearing about that is somehow like doesn't really make the public discussions is actually more of the let's call it organizational challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So data science, it's still rather new. I mean, we've been around for a few years now. It's not like fresh off
Sure.
the boat or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's still like there isn't really a consolidated process for how a tech company should work with data science, with data science teams, and there's a lot of confusion there. You hear a lot of data scientists about, like, they talk about the connection with the product manager. That is a very, very common pain point. Um, and sometimes it's not really clear about implementation. Once you have a solution, you need to really implement it. So, like, who should do it? And, like, do I even get the resources for it? I've worked with data science managers who already had full solutions ready to implement,
Mm-hmm.
but the developers needed to take that piece of code and connect it to everything you need to connect it to. Just they didn't have time allotted to work on that, and those were solutions that the company asked for. It's not like they just woke up one day and decided to do it. That's the hard problem. I mean, the data science is the easy problem. I'm so gonna get I'm gonna get so much hate mail after this podcast. Data science is not really the easy problem. There are a lot of hard problems in data science, but I don't know. I'm better at answering those, I guess,
Yeah,
at
fair
solving
enough.
those. I think it really depends on the circumstances. I can tell you that as part of my work with the Weeds community, and with specifically, we have a forum for data science managers.
Hmm.
Um, Again, it's part of the community, so it's only for women, but we talk about those things a lot. There isn't one solution. It really depends on like the specific use case, but you need to really be aware of it. You need to be aware of that being a problem, because the road hasn't really been paved yet. There isn't a
Hmm.
textbook for how to work well with like other departments, with your executives that probably expect you to deliver much faster because they're used to software, like to just software engineers and things that you can build more quickly and also with less uncertainty, which is not the case for us, as we well know.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the most common challenges that I see, that are usually only spoken about in like under behind closed doors.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I don't remember who used this term first. Maybe it was Laszlo on this podcast, but someone sort of categorized this into like people, platforms, and processes, or something like that. I remember it was three P's, but I might be wrong about one of them. So the platforms, like there are a bunch of tools, right? Even as a company that's building one of these tools, but there are a lot of solutions for different things, and for maybe more often than not, the problem is knowing which tools you need to use, which already relates to the processes that you're implementing or planning on implementing within your organization. Which is, of course, as you say, it's like every company has maybe somewhat similar problems, but the configuration of those problems is slightly different, and you need to be able to understand where you are in the problem space to know exactly which tool or which adaptation of a certain tool applies. And that's even before we touch upon the people, which I think is the main point you were trying to make. The As you probably know, this is sort of a joke within WhatsApp groups and on LinkedIn and everything. We're not even sure what the job titles are. So talking about interfaces between job titles is so far away from us that it's crazy. I guess my tips on this, right, from our experiences, um, it all relates. Like this relates to what we were talking about earlier. If you can show value faster, then you have more leverage within the organization. And one of the things that I that
Absolutely.
I that I heard from more than one that sort of one data science team is that what you actually want to do is sometimes you don't get the development resources because the organization doesn't understand that data science is not like other software development teams and things like that. So obviously there's a communication aspect of ideally you set expectations in advance. But when that doesn't happen, the relative advantage we as data scientists have is data. So you can basically go ahead and show that on this theoretical benchmark, you would do better than what the company is currently doing. And you can translate that into what the sort of business people care about, right? Like we could earn X more dollars if this model was deployed last month, and we're not making that money because we're not deploying it. Is it worth more than the time the developers would invest in developing that? And that sort of, I think, helps convey the message. Now, I'm choosing the easy mode, right? Because I chose a theoretical case where you can actually translate this into like actual money that's sitting on the table and no one is taking. But I think this is sort of a recurring theme. Like when I speak to the teams in the larger organizations where they already have like the easiest example when you go to the extremes like Google, right? Like if their recommendation engine is slightly worse, that could be literally millions of dollars that they're not making. And so in those cases, like improving the model by a tiny bit is really meaningful, and so they invest a lot of time and effort into making sure they can always deploy the best model as fast as possible. So I guess yeah, like what other best practices do you recommend to sort of companies that you're working with?
Um, yeah, so the ones I already mentioned about really being focused on what you're trying to achieve. and like the operationalization of it, not just like having a better model, but like what are the main pain points for your users that you want to solve, and then everything should start from there.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I really preach for being very conscious and deliberate about choosing what abstraction you would use for your machine learning project before you start diving into all of the other details. So
So what do you mean?
I'll
Yeah.
just make, yeah, because
What's an
it's
abstraction?
not a term that's commonly used with. I think that's part of the problem because we don't really talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna shamelessly plug here as well and say that I have a talk about that I gave in a couple of the Women Data Science Israel meetups about
Mm-hmm.
choosing the best machine learning abstraction for your business needs. So
Nice.
I'll give an example because it works better with an example. I said that I used to work for like in fraud detection. So for fraud detection, maybe I work for PayPal. I did, and I want to find out of all of the transactions that users did today. I want to find the fraudulent transactions.
Mm-hmm.
So I could think about that as a classification problem where I take each transaction and I classify it to like fraudulent or legit. And I can think about it as an anomaly detection problem. I can think about it as a clustering problem. So that's what I mean when I say abstractions. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, data scientists, and again, most data scientists are very like science, like data science oriented, and like in our communities, we talk about like the most fitting, like theoretically fitting way to solve each problem, but that
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't necessarily be the way that's best for your business needs at the moment. So I would say, like, really consider that. Like, just because I'm working on a problem that maybe screams like graph-based machine learning, for example, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that that's really what would be best to implement here. Maybe I need something quicker. Maybe I don't really need everything that graph-based machine learning could give me. But if I do it as a classifier, for example, I could deliver it much more quickly, or maybe have it more stable, or maybe the performance time, the runtime would be much quicker, which is important to me. Stuff like that. I don't really have, it's a lot of details to get into right now, so I would really recommend anyone whose interest I've picked here to check out the talk. Though
Yeah.
I think it's only in Hebrew. So if you're interested, ping me and I'll make sure to have it in English at some point.
Yeah, if you
Uh,
comment on this video and ask for the talk in English, that will help push Noah to publish an English version of it. But yeah, that sounds like something I want to listen to. We'll add a link anyway in the description of the episode. Um, but yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that you can't solve a problem if you're not thinking about it correctly, and so figuring out how to think about machine learning problems in a way that's effective is really really important. um, and yeah, that sounds like a really useful talk. I guess what diving or moving into maybe what you're doing today. How does your day to day look like? Like what does it mean from your perspective to be a data science and machine learning consultant?
so I work with different companies on it really depends on what each company needs. Sometimes I just help with the strategy, like I hear where they're at, where they're trying to get, what data they have, what abilities they have, and I help them build a strategy of what they should try, how long they should expect it to take, stuff like that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
usually shorter consultations. Um, there are companies that I work with on longer, on like projects where I not only help them design the roadmap, but I also build the project themselves, like write the actual code and play with the actual data, which is my favorite part. Um,
Sounds fun.
And I mentor, so something that became very popular mostly once that point a few years back where the market was flooded with junior data scientists
Mm-hmm.
and had really very few seniors, but everybody wanted a senior because you can normally, when you start, you can only hire one data scientist and you want
Yes.
them to know what they're doing. So
Mm-hmm.
a solution that the market came up with is a lot of times you hire a junior or a mid-level data scientist, and then you have an external consultant consult them, like mentor them,
Mm-hmm.
like a couple of hours a week. So that's also
Mm-hmm.
something I do. Um, but mostly this for the last few months, I've been focusing on my own project in alternative protein, which is part of the food tech industry or climate tech industry, depends who you ask. It's a global name, a generic name for the field of taking food that today we get from using animals, so dairy, meat, etc., and producing it in a way that doesn't involve animals, whether it's fully plant-based or whether you're using cultivated meat, for example. So that's something that I'm focused on, and I'm looking for those problems, for those bottlenecks in the industry that could be solved with machine learning, and trying to help the field get a significant boost forward.
Interesting. So when we spoke about this for the first time, I was kind of surprised that that sort of you're working on this, mainly because I didn't know that there was a or a serious data science component of food tech. So can you explain sort of your angle? Like, how did you get interested in this, and what does doing data science in this context mean?
So personally, I got into it from the. I'm a longtime vegan, and I'm a
Mm,
big believer in moving away from factory farming and using animals, and it's part of our food industry. So
mhm.
my personal interest was to see how I could use my own skill set to help bring us closer to that goal. And I was very interested to find that in the field of alternative protein specifically, there is a lot. So it's a very new field.
Mhm.
I think there was a major like boost in development and new startups and everything probably like 2 or 3 years ago. And there's getting to be more and more data, and the technology is very advanced and very interesting, by the way. And
Mhm.
you know how in most domains where you have data science, then the major problems have already been solved. So that's
Yeah.
not the case there. So there's a
Okay.
lot of room for improvement, and those are hard problems. Like those are, if they weren't hard problems, they would have been solved by now.
Mhm.
There are some hard problems which are very challenging and very interesting, and I think machine learning, if I can take us back to the beginning of this session when we said it, like it's a tool and it can be a very useful tool. So I think it can be very useful in this case as well.
Interesting. So if I'm listening to this episode and maybe someone's sort of sharing your let's say ideological outlook, or is just like thinks this is a cool field and they want to get into it, like how do you start doing data science in the food tech industry?
That is a good question. I mean, personally, I started in a way that's probably not traditional, which is just looked for all of the people that I could find that I thought might know anything about it, and I cold emailed them, and then I met up with them and I talked to them, and that's how I got started. It's not for everyone. I mean, I feel very comfortable doing that. Also, due to my experience with being self-employed and independent consultant, um, I guess it depends on where that person is, because so a lot of places have communities around alternative protein. If you're located in somewhere that's a high tech hub like San
Hmm.
Francisco or London, and obviously Israel,
Yeah.
then you can find communities that focus on alternative protein and about like food tech with that focus. So that's somewhere you could start. or you could. So there's an organization called the Good Food Institute, or GFI, and they're a nonprofit organization that really has done a lot to promote everything alternative protein. And they have a website full of relevant information. So that's also a good place to start. I've
Mm-hmm.
had a couple of people approaching me about what are important problems in the field right now that one could attempt to solve, and they have like a full database and have all of the information about it. So it's also, you can browse through that and like get to know the ropes.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess there are, if I remember correctly, you could find probably some semi-related like Kaggle competitions and things like that. So those things exist. I tend to agree with you that it's a nascent field. Like I think that the biology, maybe surprisingly, because it's usually right, like writing software is faster than doing biological experiments. But in this case, the biology is ahead of the software in many senses. So there are a lot of unsolved problems that in other fields are seem basic but have not yet been solved for this specific case. So I think it's very cool. And then of course there's the sort of um, like mission aspect of it. Like you're contributing to something that's very important and can do a lot of good. I think in the world. So yeah, I guess maybe taking this opportunity to take a step back. When you look at the machine learning and MLOps world, right? Like we talked about ChatGPT a bit. This is still like to the date of us recording this podcast. This is still the latest and greatest model, but we'll see what happens until this podcast is released next week and until the next podcast, the next episode is
I mean,
recorded.
Google announced that they're going to release a bigger,
Yeah,
better
yeah.
GPT.
The
Yeah.
for now, I feel like the latest update to this date is that both the Google and Microsoft launches have got for their like incorporated ChatGPT or ChatGPT competitor into search have gone less than spectacularly well. Like people are joking about the fact that they made like the models made mistakes within the demos of the launch. So that's kind of funny. But it shows that Microsoft and Google can still have startup mentality, which I think is also cool and scary at the same time. So yeah, what are your predictions about where we're going?
So I think that a lot of things will really consolidate in the organizational aspect, the workflow aspect. I mean, we discussed that earlier. I think we're still figuring things out. It's not really clear to people what can be done with data science. I mean, mostly to non-data scientists, but those are the people that hire data scientists. What can be done, how it should be done. There aren't really good, we have for software engineering, you have agile, and you have, I mean, it's pretty old school, but waterfall, everything is, they've talked about it tons. And
Mm-hmm.
for us, so agile, you could work with agile, but it doesn't like necessarily fits as it is. And it doesn't really, it's not really clear if you should have your own product manager or not, and stuff like that. And also, you mentioned it earlier about the job title. We use the term data scientist to describe everyone. And in reality, you have a lot of different, very different jobs hiding within that cluster. So I
Yeah.
think in the next few years, I hope that we'll see it consolidate into something that's a bit clearer,
Mm-hmm.
and even more so with MLOps, because that's even a newer field than machine learning in general. I think there would be more established best practices of how to go about it and what the best tools are, and you would see more positions for MLOps people, and or at least so I hope, because it should be the case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people are now christening LLM ops, right? So we might just have a bunch of other ops roles and then all of them are going to be called ops people, and we'll have the
All
same
of the
problem.
capital letters. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, letter soup. So yeah, maybe that's the direction we're going towards. But I mean, sort of, it's kind of a joke, but it's also not a joke at this point. I feel like the time horizon for which making a reasonable prediction makes sense is becoming shorter. Like I was contemplating if I should ask you what are your predictions for next month, but maybe that's a bit too cynical. It might like jokes aside, we don't know. There are so many interesting models that I know are in the pipeline for some of these companies, and I'm guessing, and some of them are already public. Yeah, like the world is changing fast, so it's I feel like it's becoming
Yeah.
harder to make predictions.
But I think also for the vast majority of us, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not like whether our predictions are correct or not. We're just talking about it because it's interesting. But except
Yeah.
for, again, like very few people, you're not really gonna make any major decisions based on that. So it's
Hmm.
fun to make predictions and then see that we're wrong.
Yeah. Well, or right. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it's useful to make predictions if you can act on them. I agree with you. Otherwise, it's just it's fun but not as useful.
Do you know
So yeah.
prediction markets? There are places where you can bet on predictions and like maybe monetize it, though I think that the monetization aspect isn't really working well right now.
Yeah, so I'm a Astral Codex 10 listener, which I guess we're maybe moving
We should
to.
have started with that, Dean.
So
Okay.
yeah, so
Who's
I'm
your
a.
favorite unsung character?
I have not read Unsong. I'm familiar with it, but I have not read it. I know. So that's also yeah. I have holes in my rationalist education,
HP
but
Moore at the very least.
no, no. So
Dean.
this is
You're gonna
proof
get
that
kicked out of some communities when this podcast airs.
possibly. I mean, Guy might excommunicate me. Sorry, but yeah, no, but like yes, you can make predictions. You can make bets on your predictions. I feel like yeah, that's a good point. So I guess, but continuing from this, it's kind of related. Is what do you think is true, but few people agree with? Like, what would you make a lot of money if you bet on it in a prediction market?
Okay. I don't know if it's something that you can actually put a prediction on, but my most controversial view that I most strongly believe in, and if I haven't gotten kicked out of basically all of the Israeli data science group by now, then I will after I answer this, is that the manager of the data science team does not need to be the best data science.
Ooh.
Sorry, the best data scientist on the team. I mean, not technically. They should be good managers.
Hmm.
They should really focus on that. And I think that the state of mind that I see mostly talked about of looking for someone who's also like the tech lead, let's say, like the best data scientist, remembers all of the tiny details and have implemented all of models in prediction. It just means that you're gonna get, if you're focusing on that, you're gonna miss out on other qualities. And if you're focusing on that, you're probably gonna get someone who's not as skilled in actual managing, because most of us are not, like, we don't have a perfect 10 in all of our skill set. Um, so I think that data science managers should focus on managing, and that when you hire for one, you should also focus on that. And they do really do not need to be with the best technical, let's call it technical skills, as far as data science is related.
I like that. That's a good answer because it's you're not you didn't choose a politically convenient answer. Let's call it
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
not at all.
I appreciate that. Yeah, like this is a hard question. That was a good answer. Um,
Thank you.
so so I guess to finish things up, like any recommendations for the audience? And it really doesn't have to be data science related. We did speak about a bunch of things. So this is, if you're listening, we'll link to as many things as I'll remember and find in the recording. But yeah, any other recommendations or things I should add here?
Okay, so you said that it can be anything. So that means that I'm gonna go into preach mode and I'm gonna tell our listeners about intermittent fasting, which is the best thing you could possibly do. Oh my God, do it. It is so good. So
Okay.
I've been doing that for a few years, and people ask me, Noah, how do you manage to do so many things? Nobody asked me that. I ask it myself that every once in a while, and I'm sorry, I'm getting ridiculous.
No,
As far
this is a
the
recommendation.
more we go, yeah. No, but seriously, I think it's a great hack that I really wish for more people to get to know. It's called intermittent fasting. Some people call it 16-8 or 18-6 because you fast. I mean, you only drink water for, say, 16 hours out of the 24 hours of the day, and then eat only during a time period of, say, 8 hours. And it's really, really amazing the effect it has on your body and mind. You're more energetic, you can focus more, like you don't get, like that post lunch coma. You don't have that anymore. And it really allows me to, like, I'm very passionate about my work, all cynicism aside. I don't usually I usually keep my cynicism like good amounts, but I am very passionate about what I do, and I want to deliver the best results to my clients and to the community that I lead and to people that I work with in general, and right now with alternative protein. And it really allows me to give 100% of focus and of sharp thinking, etc., throughout the day. So if you have what it takes, which means avoiding snack when you hang out with friends during the evenings, or maybe just start eating later in the day, I really recommend it.
Awesome. Any additional recommendations?
Read Unsung. It's a lot of fun. It's UNSONG.
Nice.
And there's also, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. And you can read it, and then you can excommunicate Dean for not reading it.
Exactly. Or I'll read it before you. We'll see, depending on the listener. That's amazing. I'm trying to think if I have any new recommendations. I guess if you're not, I'll give the cliche ones. If you're not watching The Last of Us, then you might be living in a cave. I think it's very good. You should, and
I'm not watching it.
you should.
I'll
It's
add
very
it to my
good.
list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's. I mean, series that are based on computer games are bad, but this one is doing a good job so far. So yeah, and I'm sure someone will comment that it's actually not based on a computer game, and I didn't know that. So I'm sorry if that's the case, but as far as I know, it's based on a computer game, and it's very good. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. There are a bunch of events that are coming up. So there's NVIDIA GTC that's happening towards the end of March. You should sign up. It's free. There's a lot of really, really good talks. I'm also giving a talk, so I'm biased. And then if you are going to be at Data Council Austin in Austin, Texas, in the end of March, so I think it's 28th to the 30th of March. I might be wrong, but it's something like that. Then I'd love to see you there. It's going to be a lot of fun. There are a lot of good people coming, a lot of interesting conversations, and yeah, reach out to me if you're there. So with that,
Maybe I can also mention that I'll
sure.
be in London during April. And if you or anyone you know has, you being the listeners, not specifically you, Dean, though as
Hmm.
well, if you have anything to do with the alternative protein or animal welfare in general, and you think that we might have an interesting chat, then hit me up. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think Dean will probably link below.
Yes.
And by the way, in general, I also give pro bono consulting sessions to startups that are either founded by female founders, by women, or are in the alternative protein space. So if you're interested in that, hit me up. If you have anything interesting to say about alternative protein and machine learning, I would love to hear it. And I respond to all emails.
Wow, that's that's a big commitment.
I told
Amazing.
you, intermittent fasting.
That's true. Maybe that's the secret I need to adopt. Well, Noah, thank you very much for joining. This was a pleasure. And thank you to the audience. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you here next time. Bye.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you for listening to the MLOps podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like the video or subscribe. If you have any feedback, leave a comment below. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.